This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Ziak and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. I can't believe I didn't make it through that.
You're overthinking it now, aren't you?
You know what caused me to overthink it? Our guest. And you know why he made me overthink it? Because I looked at the numbers before we got on the air here. You want to take a guess at how many episodes our guest has been on?
12.
20. This is number 20.
What?
This is number 20 for Mr. Phil Fleming. Hello, Phil. Welcome back to the show. 20.
Wow. Okay.
Now let's revisit.
Usually I count that stuff.
You did 3 last year. You did 3 the year before that. That's 6 in the last 2 years.
Wow.
You did.
And I was not on the one on my pick last year. So
in 2021 you were on 6 episodes of the podcast. Now granted, it was COVID. We were having a lot of people on all the time, but 6 episodes. In 2020 you joined us for 5 episodes, and in 2019 2 episodes. Lots of picks, lots of roundtables. Needless to say, you and Gavin must have, equal parts there in terms of.
I don't know how that's possible. Gavin's been part of this a lot longer than I have.
Yes, but he wasn't always on the show earlier in terms of making an appearance. So, but you got to be close, if not tied. We'll get into those numbers when Gavin comes on. He'll be joining us actually in a couple of weeks for, I believe, an aughts episode we'll be doing with Gavin.
Ooh.
But I think so. Or maybe it's a 90s episode. I forgot to check the year of the album that he suggested. But that's not now. This is now. We are in the now. What is the album, Phil, that you have brought to us for 2024?
So in contrast to last year's pick, I figured I would do something a little more canon for Dig Me Out.
Okay.
And I chose, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. It certainly helped that a certain Tim Minichi suggested this particular album. And I don't know a whole lot about the band, but I was always fascinated by this particular album, and it is Big Hates. You're soaking in it.
You're soaking in it. What it is?
Yes.
What is it? Is it? What is it? We do not know.
Maybe based on the album cover, it looks like maybe some algae.
Yeah. Doesn't look good for whoever it is. But that is
some unclean water, pond water.
Very 90s album cover. You got 2 different fonts. One of them is definitely handmade, and you have some sort of a unclear photograph happening there. Yeah. It's been manipulated in 1990s Adobe Photoshop or something. Jay, it's a program you would have had in college to.
Yeah, it's probably seeing a multiply effect there on the layers.
Multiply effect. So you're right. I did throw this in. I have a huge catalog of records from the I Hate the 90s blog. And one day I was just going through sampling and I was like, ooh, this sounds good. I'm going to throw it into and it didn't win, but you brought it to the attention. So was this before I brought it to the poll? Did you listen to this before?
Well, it was a contender. Like as far back as last year, right after I gave my pick last year, and I was like, all right. So it kind of goes with the motif of not very well known, at least in the US and that kind of thing. And I mean, the fact that you brought it up in the suggestion box just solidified it for me. So,
and this wasn't a band that was like, oh, they're, one and done or two and done or something like that. There are connections to the current world with members of this band.
The current world.
Well, sort of. I'll explain what I'm talking about here.
yes, please do.
So Big Hate, Jay, had you heard of them?
No, I mean, I saw I remember the other album being suggested at one point, and then when this came through, it just sounded like the most 90s band name and the most 90s album cover, but I had never heard the band.
History of the band.
So the band was formed in the early, there's the other album cover. And if you were in college radio in the 90s, you definitely had one of these albums come through your through your mailbox from the record label. But they formed in the early 1990s. It was a pair of brothers, singer-guitarist Brian Stanger, sorry. And his brother Adam, who was the bassist. And then they had drummer Stephen Panas with them, or Panas. They ended up relocating from New York to Georgia. And that's where they picked up second guitarist and possibly second baseman Rusty Cobb. Based on that name, he sounded like he would have been Rusty Cobb would have been the second baseman for like the Atlanta Braves AAA team or something in the 90s. Somehow not a baseball player. They recorded 2 albums, as we mentioned. Big Hate, self-titled, came out in 95, and then this, You're Soaking in It, came out in 1998. They were both released through Flip Records. Flip Records, if you gentlemen remember, was the label that gave us Limp Bizkit. That's who put out their debut album in the 90s. They actually were like just kind of a rock record or rock label. Not hugely successful, but put out some albums here and there. And then Limp Bizkit had a chance to sign between 2 labels that offered them deals, and they signed with Flip Records. And then that was it. I mean, then they sold like millions of records. And they signed other bands like Cold and Stained were also to Flip Records. So a lot of your new metal bands ended up signing to this label. Now they only, like I said, made 2 records, and then they disbanded. And in 1999, Adam Stanger forms the band Comes the Fall with guitarist Nico Constantine, drummer Bevan Davies, and a singer-guitarist named William Duvall from Atlanta, Georgia. They ended up being so they record some albums. They did a self-titled album in Atlanta, and then they moved to Los Angeles, and they ended up releasing that record through William Duvall's like label that he had created. They end up going to tour on Jerry Cantrell's first solo record. And his band, Cantrell's band, which was Robert Trujillo and Mike Borden, weren't available. He had Comes the Fall be his band for part of that tour. They ended up touring with Creed and Nickelback. Sorry. So this is where Jerry Cantrell meets William Duvall, is because Adam Stanger's joining this, this band going out and then moving out to LA, which is pretty interesting that this has that connection. And they have, I think, kept going. I don't know that William Duvall. I think Stanger has maybe kept going with some other stuff, but they actually put out records in 2000, 2001, and 2007, an EP in 2006. And I think that's when Duvall like officially joined Alice in Chains. And then Stanger has also been in a couple other bands called Melt and the Young Royals, which were, I don't know what labels those were on. Anyway, That's the kind of the history of Big Hate for you. That's their connection. That's the big connection is Alice in Chains. So nice. not a direct one. It's like a 6 degrees of separation type thing. So comments over at Patreon. We'll share the poll results of where the album Better EP and Decent Single after. But here are some comments. Keith Preston said, "Holy guitars. They are thick and they are everywhere. I really like the groove metal and southern rock elements in the music. And was that a banjo? The singer is really strong. I'm going to say where the album. I'm probably going to pick this one up." Gavin said, "I voted where the album as I like the music. Aside from the Virginia song, and they're consistently good enough for me to enjoy. I did think this might have been an Aussie album, as you're soaking in it was a well-known advertising slogan for dishwashing liquid here in the 80s. Richard Waterman.
It was in the U.S. in the 80s too.
What was it?
Palmolive.
Palmolive. There you go. Richard Waterman said, "Liked the first album, and this was also a good listen. I like the slide guitar bits. They add a bit of a different flavor. Singer is more than adequate for this type of rock. I would put them in the post-grunge bracket, but a cut above your 7 Mary 3s, 3 Days Grace, Days of the New, etc. It's pretty raw. The drums are thumping, and it has a hidden track. As if that wasn't 90s enough. As if that wasn't 90s enough, look at the artwork. We're the album." There you go. Everybody agrees the album is, artwork-wise, a definition of what a 90s mid-level label album artwork would look like. Like this you wouldn't get this on Geffen, but you would get it on a smaller label because they would outsource that.
This particular record was actually, it was done through Flip, but it was a distribution deal through A&M.
Ah, interesting.
So it did get a somewhat wide release.
Okay.
If you can call it a wide release. But yeah, that was the year or so that Flip had a distribution deal with A&M, because Cold's first record came out on Flip A&M as well. And yeah.
Well, they didn't get a big enough distribution deal to actually get their own Wikipedia page, because there is not one for Big Hate. There's one for Adam Stanger because of his time in Comes with the Fall. Comes with the Fall. But sorry, Big Hate. No individual page for you. So let's get into the record. Jay, tell me one thing you liked about your Soaking in It by Big Hate.
Well, no shock based on the comments so far, it's the guitars. And it really, I think, exemplifies what I love about the 90s. Like why I do this podcast, why I'm interested in this music is just there's an unbridled energy around guitar playing, and I think this album really encapsulates that. So you got what sounds like very talented players. There's a lot of skill here, but they're exploring sounds that are both ugly and pretty. It's using fuzz and octaves and these big gnarly tones, but then also like using some chorus and just open to anything, which I think is really exciting to hear, which I don't even know that you hear that as much anymore, right? As somebody who loves guitar music, I feel like things have gotten back to being fairly safe. There's a couple tones you hear, and in the 80s you heard a couple tones, but like this just opens up this whole palette of just doing so much with the guitar and letting it be expressive. In that you don't know where things are going to go. You don't know where notes are going to hit. It's a little loose, but not so loose that it's noise. It's in this really interesting place that was just, it only happened in the 90s. And you've heard some bands after do it, but it just really encapsulates to me a lot of the exciting stuff that was going on in terms of guitar. It was mentioned, it's almost like every song has a signature guitar part to it. You know, the slide on Century, those big fuzz chords on Sufi or Sufi.
Sufi.
So that all of a sudden then on West Virginia you get this Southern rock twang thing. You know, these little bends that they're doing, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's like that started to make me think of bands like Big Wreck more than some of these like I think some of the references I was hearing from the comments were more towards this late 90s like new metal stuff. I was hearing more like moments of Big Rack, for example, because that's another band that like just takes all these influences and they're super technical players, but also willing to explore and try weird shit. So there was little moments of like West Virginia kind of hit me there.
Red in the face, alcohol and bad taste. Bad taste. You never met a girl that was so familiar to you from West Virginia. It was kind of like the same victim you had been running into, and no one missed you. It used to be so.
There's these really cutting melodic riffs, like writer's block. So even the riff writing is varied. You know, sometimes it's these melodic kind of single string guitar parts, sometimes it's chords, sometimes it's a mix of both. You just get so much range on this. You know, they don't shy away from doing big riffs and pinched harmonics. You know, they're kind of go anywhere, which is really fun to listen to. And I also think it's interesting that it's presented as two. I don't know if there's two guitar players or not, but to my ears, it's presented as two guitar players that have very similar approaches and tones, but then don't always play the same thing. You know, they're doing this, you know, push and pull constantly of, well, here's the idea, and then the other guitar's kind of playing off the idea a little bit with a slightly different way to play the riff, and then they kind of come together for these moments of harmony. You know, they'll suddenly like the two guitars will play the same thing, and then they'll break apart again. I just found that dynamic really, it almost felt like two brothers playing guitar, or two people that like coming from the same mentality of like, but then being creative with it, not playing exactly the same thing. Like you would hear, like if one guitar player tried to play two parts, you know, they would probably just play the same part. This sounds more loose than that, which is really cool. So yeah, I think it's a really unique tone too. You know, I couldn't really point to anyone particular like, oh, this sounds like Smashing Pumpkins, or oh, this, you know, the guitar tones and the sounds that they're creating here sound unique, which is hard to do. I mean, there's a lot of really cool guitar players and tones going on in the 90s, but this is like found its own little niche. You know, it gets big and up in your face. Some of the stuff sounds like it's maybe like direct in almost. It's like super loud, almost like some of these solos sound like Dinosaur Jr. solos where they're just like blowing your face off. And then other times the guitars fall back, you know, they're more atmospheric. It's really a fun album from a guitar standpoint. So hats off for them for, you know, carving out a little niche here with guitar in the 90s. And I think putting a bed of music here together with riffs and tones they're a lot of fun. So that's the main thing that worked for me. What worked for you, Tim?
A lot of what you just said, and it took me a while to figure it out, and then when you get to Beauty Mark with that banjo, I was like, man, this kind of reminds me of Big Rack. I was like, what the heck? And it's not that, you know, Ian Thornley has a very kind of like studied guitar style. I mean, he's like a Berkeley, you know, guitarist, and he does a lot of incredible things, and this is like a step up in terms of, like you said, that it's fuzzier. It's weird because it is almost like the 90s China Star Jr. with that just big heavy tone. There were parts of it reminded me of Our Lady Peace, and especially in some of the mid-tempo songs like West Virginia, or slower songs like Disappointed, the singer has a little bit of Raine Maida in his, in similar to way when we talked about Finger 11 a few weeks back. But this is, I feel like, a little bit less. It doesn't come through on every song. Also, some of the guitar stuff, and I know this is an album that's a year later, but honestly, the amount of a lot of like harmonics and little feedback and like things going a little off the rail in terms of guitar reminded me of the first Muse album, where you get a lot of just chaotic things happening in really interesting ways. Like that in Writer's Block, there's a lot of like harmonic stuff happening and these big lead sounds that are so heavy and so uncompressed. It feels really big, and as opposed to, I think when you get into a lot of bands in 98, 99, like they start compressing their guitar tone sounds in that new metal space, especially, and it sounds somehow both big and small at the same time. Like you clearly are supposed to get the sense out of those bands that it's a big guitar tone, but it's like they suck all the heft out of it and then you get that very metallic-y sound, whereas this is like so much fatter because of that fuzzy sound, and it creates a really nice dynamic from the quiet to the loud, because it just gets super loud when that happens. Like you mentioned, there's quite a bit of twists and turns that I wasn't expecting, and maybe it's the Georgia aspect of them moving from New York to Georgia to do this band. Like West Virginia has that Southern rock vibe to it. I mentioned the banjo and Beauty Mark, but there's some like Southern aspect to this, like Gothic type of thing happening that I can't quite put my finger on, but that I hear it quite a bit. So I'm with you. Like the guitars are like the shining beacon on the hill with this record. They're just so big and so loud and so many riffs, and sometimes they're not even necessarily like the most original. It's just like big drop D riffs, but they sound so good that I just go, okay, that's cool. I don't need them to be remaking, the guitar to just make it heavy and make it rock, and they pretty much do that.
It is with great urgency that we bring you these following messages. Most people think they know all they need to know about Christian rock.
Whether you think it's cheesy propaganda pretending to be cool,
or if you think it's the only pop music unsullied by worldly vices,
you'll find something to love on Rock That Doesn't Roll.
I'm Leah Payne, author of A History of Contemporary Christian Music.
And I'm Andrew Gill, a public radio producer who grew up on Christian rock.
On Rock That Doesn't Roll, we're talking with people who loved Christian rock in its peak era and learning how it affected them as they grew up.
Listen to Rock That Doesn't Roll wherever you get your podcasts.
The 1990s. My very favorite decade, especially for music. This is Dope Nostalgia, and I'm your host, Naomi Carmack. And every week, we revisit the era that brought us Hammer Pants, Crystal Pepsi, Pogs, Hypercolor, Pokemon, and some of the greatest songs of all time. On Dope Nostalgia, not only do I have episodes where I talk about the big artists of the 90s with friends, but sometimes those big artists come on the show. Past guests include Naughty by Nature, George Lamond, Alana Miles, Color Me Bad, Biff Naked, Ed the Sock, Shakespeare's Sister, Two Unlimited, The Funky Bunch, Technotronic, Rosala, Tara Kemp, Mr. Big, Honeymoon Suite, Right Said Fred, and so many more. You can always leave us a voicemail and tell us what you think, and we'll play it on the show. 780-851-8785. Dope Nostalgia, a podcast made for 90s kids like me. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are served.
So, Phil, what are your thoughts? What works for you on your soaking in it?
Ditto. No, I mean, in addition to what Jay said, especially, something I really just for some reason absolutely loved about this record was just how messy it is. Just like I found it hard to believe like someone that has a pedigree actually mixed the record. And Howie Weinberg mastered it, and that's how it came out. Just dynamics everywhere. Like even on the more in your face type material, and yeah, just for some reason, every time I played, I just for some reason, 40 some odd minutes later, like, oh, it's already over. I need to hear this more. And it's just ideas everywhere. I love that about this particular album. And you don't get many albums where you're hearing just ideas in everything being played, as opposed to the drummer just keeps that 4/4 time, and the bass just 1 2 3 4. Not on this record. And yeah, just because this album, it just feels like it could have fallen apart at any moment, literally any moment, and it doesn't, and it's held together really well, like loose and tight. I think Jay said that, loose and tight at the same time for the very same reason.
You mentioned the production. It was produced by Rick Parashar. He did Temple of the Dog and Pearl Jam's 10 and
recorded at London Bridge, where Pearl Jam's 10 got recorded.
So I also just noticed that he did the Pride and Glory album from 1994, which I feel like we've talked about that on the Discord maybe, but I don't think it's ever gotten into a poll. Someone needs to put that into a poll. But yeah, I thought that was, pardon?
At the time, I loved that album. I haven't listened to it in a long time.
Yeah, I can't say that I have either. And I definitely know that it's something I'd be interested in. I mean, that's Zakk Wylde, right?
Yep.
Isn't that, so I think I would be into that.
James Lomenzo and the drummer's well known too. He was really good. It's a really good band.
But as you mentioned, it's Parashar and Howie Weinberg mastered it.
Yeah.
And this is a huge sounding record. I mean, this has got some meat on the bone, so to speak.
I mean, but you wouldn't think that this was a major label record listening to it.
No.
Especially in 1998. Because a lot of even a lot of the bands that we really loved and adored in the early 90s were, if they were still around, were cleaning up the sound and polishing more for radio consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And this definitely was not that type of sound.
So Jay, what doesn't work for you on the record?
I agree that the vocals, to me, right away were in the Raine Maida, Our Lady Peace type of style, which I love. I have no issue with that. I think I found myself a bit at odds, though, as I got more into the record and was attracted to the guitars and what was going on musically. I found myself sometimes at odds with what was going on vocally. They can be as loose as the guitars, so there's a lot going on. You've got this band and these two guitars like pushing and pulling and, things, seeming to maybe fall apart at any moment, but then you've got a singer that's adding to the chaos at times.
Mm-hmm.
And not always landing like a really compelling chorus or coherent melody. There's certainly some good stuff on here where you're like, oh, that's a cool thing, and I love what he's doing there. And there's certainly some good moments, but I think across the board for the whole record, I think I would want less activity with the vocal, just because the guitars are so strong and the band is so strong. Or just like, let's just tone it back a little. Vocally, you don't have to do so much. Because there's just a lot of like extra notes and adding in a lot of emotion, which, I love emotion, but these other sounds, yelping and the extra stuff that I think it just makes it hard to get into the record. I think my journey on this one was, ooh, this sounds like Our Lady Peace. It's like, right? Because I think most people hear vocals first. That's what I did. And then as I listened to the record more, I was like, ooh, there's other stuff going on here. Let me pay attention to the guitars. And as I got to that level, I was like, oh shit, this is really cool. So then I was at odds with like, it's like Our Lady Peace with like way more active guitars. And there's a reason why Our Lady Peace only has one guitar player. Right. Like they made that decision of like, hey, our sound's going to work because Raine's going to kind of like be over the top. And then guitar wise, we're just going to hold it down, write good songs and like, put some meat on the bone, but largely stay out of the way. This band is like not recognizing that. It's like, we're going to do the Raine Maida thing, like super active vocal, but then we're also going to do dueling J Mascis guitars. So short answer, the vocals, and more just his voice is fine. Just tone it back, just scale it down. Find some really solid melodies, stick with those, and then other than that, just do less. Anything that work for you, Tom?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a little bit of fatiguing that happens as you go through the record, because it's, especially you get in headphones, you crank it, and then by the back half, it's like, okay, this is a lot. Speaking of the J Mascis, the thing that I missed was like double that guitar with an acoustic. Like, give me something like that. It doesn't have to be through a whole record, just like a couple of the songs where you're at a more of a mid-tempo or a slower tempo. Let's see what it sounds like with, an acoustic doubled instead of two electric guitars. So like on a song like Lemonade, which is a little bit slower for the band, something like that would have been interesting.
You want to switch to
because they obviously took some, creative risks with the guitar in using the banjo. I wish there was more slide. The slide in Century is super cool. I could have used 2 more songs with the slide. I'm a sucker, always have been, for slide in an alternative rock song. It just provides something unique and special that, you don't hear that much. So his vocal, I think, there's not a song on here where I go, that's the blatant radio single. It almost needed I don't know how to describe the cadence. He tends to just like sing and go and like stretch that note out. I'm like, I needed like some quicker cadences to happen where he's like, it's more rapid fire, and he doesn't really ever do that. And a lot of singers, Rick Parashar worked with one in Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder does a lot of time where he does rapid fire vocals. I can think of Raine Maida doing that in various songs. So I just needed like some punchier vocals. There's a lot of singing and I don't want to say caterwauling, but that's kind of where my brain's going. And I just needed a little bit of, it's not really restraining, it's just a different style. I just needed him to change it up a little bit more than just belting it out, because he feels like he's floating above the songs a lot of the time instead of connecting with what's happening. Like, it feels like a lot of the stuff was maybe recorded on top of it as opposed to with it. So I don't know how Rick Parashar works, but that was just my feeling from it. Phil, anything not work for you?
Ditto. No. No, I mean, if I do have a complaint about it, it is kind of the vocals. I mean, you don't necessarily hear a radio single. I kind of heard 2, but with that kind of production, and it would have never worked. It would have had to been redone. West Virginia and Writer's Block. Those had the biggest hooks. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, my complaint about it is hardly a complaint. I mean, honestly, like there's a couple of these songs where I wish I wrote them myself. I mean, Sufi, I wish I wrote myself. With the vocals sometimes too in your face or not in your face enough, depending on the song. I mean, there's the lack of uniformity on the entire record is the most apparent on the vocals.
That's probably why they didn't make it to, big radio stations and because especially by 98, I mean, when did the second Our Lady Peace album come out? Is it like 96?
Yeah, at this point, Our Lady Peace is starting to simplify, right?
Super simplify. Yeah.
I mean, they're starting to get to that point where it's like guitar player, like you were doing doing some cool stuff before, but like just play.
They Clumsy was 96, something like that, and they went total adult contemporary in 2001. But like where Raine did not do any of the histrionics that Our Lady Peace was known for.
Right, and sort of lost their personality along the way. Yeah, when we speak of Our Lady Peace, I'm often just thinking like, oh, I'm just talking about Naveed. Like the kind of, I mean, some of the histrionics is still there, obviously, on the follow-up album and the third album, but the guitar stuff changes dramatically. I feel like when you listen to, what's the second album's title? I'm forgetting. Clumsy. Like, I feel like a lot of those songs are chord progressions, and a lot of Naveed is riffs.
Yeah.
And this feels like riffs, this record.
And Clumsy's 97, so that's about the time that this is.
Okay, 97.
Yeah, Clumsy's like a little bit simpler guitar-wise. You're right. They switch more to chords, and they keep progressing that way to gravity.
By then they had a US deal, and now they're trying to break the US. And...
You had to follow the 4-chord format, and basically do the Everclear style of chugga chugga chords, which I'm gonna trademark that when we talk about guitars that are just
chugga chords.
Yeah, just chugga 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 chugga, which also sounds like "Let's Go All the Way" by Sly Fox. So yeah, I'm looking at 98. I'm trying to figure out if this is gonna, why wasn't this bigger? And I think this would have been
all right. Yeah, I discovered this album in a dollar store, if that's any indication.
Yeah, and it's, if this was 93, I think people would have been like, whoa, what is this? Yeah. This is cool.
Yeah, but you see, I think it also would have been a little too much in 93. I mean, it would have gotten more attention for certain, but
maybe even 95. But I think by 98, it's past the point at which this could be anybody's, like, I mean, maybe there are big hate heads out there who love this record, and I don't know that there's a big hate, thriving community, but there might be a few people out there. I am always amazed when I find out that there are like bands that I have just written off as having any fans, and then you find out there are like 10,000 people on Facebook in a group and they all love this band. Like T-Ride has a very active Facebook fan group. And I'm like, how is that possible? They put out one obscure record in like 1990 and they have this, like, they get like multiple posts per day.
Wow.
For T-Ride. Like, if that's happening, like, I can't imagine what the Loud Lucy Facebook page is doing, or the Funk Junkies page. I'm going to keep mentioning Funk Junkies until I manifest that album onto our podcast. So Jay, let's get into our overall ratings on this record. Were the album, better EP, or decent single? Where do you land?
I'm going with the Worthy album. This was a grower for me too. First listen or two, I was like, not quite sure, but as I listened to it more, I got more and more into it, and it sort of got its hooks into me. So I think this is an album that I would want to listen to even more. I think I'll get more out of it the more I listen to it. And I'm able to balance kind of as I'm listening to it, like focusing more down on the guitars, and it, I've adjusted my expectations, I think, of the of what the band sounds like, what they're about. It's not about like hooky songs and pop songs to me, even though it's kind of generally the format they're going for. It's more this energy around the guitar playing and the twists and turns that takes you on. So for those reasons, I'm going to go with the Worthy album. Where'd you land?
For those reasons, I'm out. What's that from?
What?
And for those reasons, it's from Shark Tank, when they're pitching an idea, and the shark will be like, and for those reasons, I'm out, when he doesn't want to bid on the whatever it is. I am at a
music.
What?
Cue the dramatic music after they say that.
Yes, exactly. Dun, dun, dun. I'm at a better EP. I like the first 4 songs. I think I would add Wrong, Sheep, and Lemonade, so I would be at 7 songs, and that would make my EP. It's a close to an album, but not quite there. All the songs are of very reasonable length. I didn't think anything was like too crazy. We do have to mention there's the hidden track, Sugar Glider and Swollen. The hidden track go on for like 11 minutes. So, and there's some dead space obviously in between the two songs. But this isn't streaming, I believe. So
no, it is not.
Which is weird because Flip Records has plenty of bands of theirs streaming. So I don't know why in particular Big Hate is not.
That was the other thing that wanted me to bring this one to the podcast, because other than a YouTube rip, you can't find this streaming anywhere.
Nope. You can get it over to I Hate the 90s blog. That's
a freaking crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, then any music is not accessible on streaming is
true.
Laughable considering the promise of what we were supposed to have with streaming of music and television and movies. Like, oh, everything, the whole library of everything will be available. Not quite. That's not how quite it's going to work.
Keep these around.
Exactly, sir. Exactly. So what is your final rating?
I didn't necessarily care for the hidden track. I mean, it starts off with a sample from, I believe it's Slacker. But I'm definitely at an album. I was genuinely surprised when I got this and how just enthralled I was with it, because if anyone joins the union and gets in our Discord, they know I'm a lyrics person. And the lyrics, while they are very, very 90s, the music is primary here. It's the music is the one that is the part that drives this record for its, barring the hidden track, 45 minutes. So
yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get a remastered deluxe version of this record.
What? Come on.
Sorry, guys. You're not getting your vinyl, your 180 gram vinyl pressing.
Yeah.
Though you could do some cool things with the
nice algae green.
Yeah. Someone got paid tens of dollars to make that album cover.
What's the total runtime on this?
Like 48, including the hidden.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's only 10 songs plus that bonus track, and all those songs are mostly under 4 and 5 minutes. So,
yeah.
Hell, Sufi's 219.
It's definitely not an overly long record.
Nope.
But it's also not a blink and you'll miss it type thing.
Nope.
And I mean, I know YouTube definitely favored shorter records, especially these days. Most of us do. But at the time, we were, we were all about the 55, 60-minute albums, and
sure,
all the long tunes and everything. But
sometimes Still Am, it's just got to be the right 65 minutes.
Yeah.
The Patreon community, 100% worthy album. No dissenter. I was the lone dissenting voice.
Yeah.
What is your problem?
I don't know.
Seriously.
Why do you hate music?
The hell, Tim?
What? Jay, we are coming off of a decent single from you.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't talk about hating music.
But that was a very divisive record.
Well, sure.
The polling was split. We were split.
Mm-hmm.
We're not split here. Only you're the outlier.
Okay, I guess I'll leave.
See yourself out.
And for that, I'm out.
Get in the corner.
Well, there you go. I'm the lone voice of disharmony in this discussion. So, Phil, thank you for bringing this record to us and allowing us to discuss Big Hate. Nothing but big love for your pick.
Yeah, I'm glad you mostly liked it.
Mostly, it's not. I didn't hate anything. there was stuff that worked better for me, and that's how life is sometimes.
Well,
we're not all on the same page.
I mean, my pick for this was just so multifaceted. I mean, it's no secret that I wanted to, aside from the Wild Hearts pick, I wanted to confound. Like nothing was a surefire slam dunk in my opinion, other than the Wild Hearts record. And I thought that this one would be right up the alley. And yeah, I mean,
I believe that's true. I believe that is absolutely true. You have it's a ball. I'm trying to make a bowling analogy here. Right down the middle of the lane.
Look, I'm not complicated here. I like guitars.
Yeah.
And I don't really like rap. So if you want to pick an album that I'm going to like, it's not brain surgery.
Good
it's
to
not
know.
40 chess.
But then again, I'm going to have a hard time confounding after, having Kylie Minogue on this podcast. So,
I like melody.
He likes melody.
Give me some melody. I can get on board with it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for a record like this, it was just with a sound that was literally all over the place, pretty much all the time. I mean, we all came up with alt rock and 120 minutes and all of that. You didn't have stuff that sounded like this necessarily being played there.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, you had especially in the mid 90s, you had all these small labels, getting big deals with big labels to distribute these things. But other than printing up a few copies to get in a couple of stores in Topeka, nothing really came of it. So,
well,
yep. Like I said, canon.
We look forward to what confounding pick you'll have for us next year. And if
I've already got ideas,
I'm sure everybody always likes to taunt us with they have ideas, and we like to know that they're working on it. They're in their labs with their coats on, processing the information, running it through the computers, getting the printouts on the little cards with the little holes in them. That's the album that we'll be picking. That's the statistically the best record possible to pick. Want to remind folks, if you want to pick a record, you can do so by joining the union at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. It's where stuff like this happens. Votes on album polls, our monthly album review tournament of 9 albums being whittled down to 1 in our tournament of Patreon voters. Those albums are suggested at digmeoutpodcast.com. It's also where you can go to sign up for the Box newsletter, our weekly newsletter of 80s, 90s, and aughts relevant music, books, movies, TV shows, documentaries, etc. Plus, that's where you can find the 80s Metal podcast every other week. 80s Metal delivered right to your door virtually. And lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you can go to leave positive feedback for the show. So for Jay, I am Tim. We're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.